The morning sun cast long shadows across the Crystal Plaza as Jake Martinez adjusted his formal jacket for the third time. He still felt uncomfortable in the ceremonial clothes the Valorians had provided for him. Back on Earth, he would have worn his usual work coveralls and steel-toed boots. But this was Valoria, and today was special. "Stop fidgeting," Amy whispered beside him. She was his colleague from the infrastructure project, and unlike Jake, she seemed perfectly comfortable in the flowing alien garments. "You look fine." Jake nodded but couldn't help tugging at his collar again. Around them, thousands of Valorians filled the plaza, their tall, slender forms swaying gently in the light breeze. They were beautiful people, Jake thought, graceful in a way that humans could never quite manage. Their skin had a faint silver sheen and their eyes were large and expressive. When they moved, it looked like dancing. "Remind me again why we're here?" Jake asked quietly. Amy smiled. "Because the Emperor invited us personally. The selection ceremony only happens once a year. It's a huge honor to witness it." Jake had been on Valoria for 6 months now, working on a water distribution system for the capital city. The project was a joint effort between Earth and Valoria, part of the growing alliance between their worlds. He was good at his job, great even, but he had never expected to be invited to a royal ceremony. A deep horn sounded across the plaza, and the crowd fell silent. Jake watched as a procession emerged from the palace gates. First came the musicians playing instruments that produced sounds like wind through crystal caves. Then came the nobles in their elaborate robes. Finally, the royal family appeared. The Emperor was an imposing figure, even by Valorian standards. He wore robes of deep purple that seemed to shimmer with their own light. Beside him walked the Empress, and behind them came their children. Jake recognized Prince Aldrich, the heir to the throne. He had met the prince once at a diplomatic function and found him to be serious but kind. But it was the youngest daughter who caught everyone's attention. Princess Kira walked with her head held high, her silver hair braided with strands of blue crystal. She wore a new ceremonial dress that Jake had heard the palace staff talking about for weeks. It had been commissioned from traders who dealt with the Gravian Empire, a wealthy civilization from the far side of the galaxy. The fabric was a deep midnight blue, almost black, and it caught the light in mesmerizing ways. The royal family took their places on the raised platform at the center of the plaza. The Emperor raised his hand and his voice carried across the crowd without need for amplification. "Today we honor tradition," the Emperor said. "Today the finest knights of Valoria will compete for the greatest honor our realm can bestow. One will be chosen to serve as royal guard to Princess Kira, to protect her with their life, to stand beside her as she grows into her role as a leader of our people." The crowd erupted in cheers. Jake clapped politely, though he didn't fully understand the significance of what was happening. Amy had tried to explain it to him, but human culture and Valorian culture were very different things. "The trials will test strength, courage, and honor," the Emperor continued. "But the final test is the oldest and most sacred. The chosen knight must prove they can protect the princess in any circumstance. They must carry her to safety should danger arise." Jake watched as 12 knights stepped forward from the crowd. They were the best warriors in Valoria, each one a champion in their own right. Their armor gleamed in the sunlight, crafted from metals that were lighter than anything Earth could produce. The knights were tall and muscular by Valorian standards, trained from childhood in combat and athletics. The trials began. Jake watched with growing interest as the knights competed in various tests. They fought with training weapons, demonstrating their skill with blade and staff. They raced through obstacle courses that seemed impossible to Jake's eyes, leaping across gaps that would have killed a human. They solved tactical problems and recited codes of honor. Hours passed, and the field of 12 was narrowed to 5. Then 3. Finally, 2 knights remained. Sir Valen, a veteran warrior with decades of service, and Lady Sarah, a younger knight who had risen quickly through the ranks. Both were impressive, and the crowd seemed divided on who should win. The Emperor stood again. "The final test will now commence. Each knight will carry Princess Kira up the ceremonial steps to the palace entrance. This test demonstrates the sacred duty of protection. A guard must be able to move the princess to safety no matter the circumstance, no matter the burden." Jake leaned forward with interest. The ceremonial steps were steep and numerous. He counted them quickly, 50 steps, maybe more. For the Valorians who lived in low gravity, it should be relatively easy. Valoria's gravity was less than half of Earth's. Jake had felt like he could jump over buildings when he first arrived, though he had learned to control his movements over the past months. Surveillance approached the princess first. He bowed deeply, then positioned himself to lift her. Princess Kira stood calmly, her expression neutral. The knight bent his knees, wrapped his arms around her, and lifted, or tried to. His face strained immediately. His muscles bulged with effort. He managed to lift the princess perhaps 6 inches off the ground before his arms began to shake. The crowd gasped. Surveillance was known for his strength. He had won lifting competitions. He had carried wounded soldiers from battlefields. But now he struggled to lift the princess at all. After a long, painful moment, Surveillance lowered the princess back to the ground. He stepped back, his face filled with shame and confusion. The crowd murmured in shock. Lady Sarah stepped forward next, determination written across her face. She was younger and perhaps stronger than Surveillance. Surely she could manage what he could not. She approached Princess Kira, bowed and lifted. The same thing happened. Lady Sarah managed to get the princess slightly higher, perhaps a foot off the ground, but she too began to shake and strain. Her breathing became labored. Sweat appeared on her silver brow. After several moments of effort, she too had to lower the princess. The crowd's murmurs turned to worried conversations. Something was wrong. The emperor stood, his expression troubled. He gestured to the remaining knights who had competed earlier in the day. All knights who reached the final trials, step forward, he commanded. 10 more knights approached. One by one, they attempted to lift Princess Kira. One by one, they failed. Some couldn't lift her at all. Others managed to raise her a few inches before their strength gave out. The strongest among them, a massive knight named Sir Bram, managed to lift her to chest height and take 2 stumbling steps before he had to stop. None could carry her up even the first step. Jake watched in fascination as the Valorians tried to make sense of what was happening. The court physician rushed forward to examine Princess Kira. He checked her vital signs, asked her questions, and performed various tests. Finally, he announced that she was in perfect health. The knights were examined next. All were healthy, strong, and fit. There was no medical explanation for their failure. The nobles began to whisper among themselves. Jake heard fragments of conversation around him. Curse, sabotage, dark magic. The Valorians didn't really believe in magic, but they had no other explanation for what was happening. Princess Kira stood in the center of the plaza, maintaining her composure despite the chaos around her. Jake could see the frustration in her eyes, though she hid it well. This was supposed to be her ceremony, her day to select a guardian. Instead, it had turned into a mystery that no one could solve. The emperor raised his hand for silence. "We will postpone the ceremony," he announced. "Our scholars will investigate this matter. We will discover what prevents our finest warriors from completing the sacred test." As the emperor spoke, Jake's mind was working. He was an engineer, trained to solve problems by looking at all the variables. He studied Princess Kira from his position in the crowd. She looked normal, healthy. The dress was beautiful, certainly, but it was just fabric, wasn't it? Wait. Jake thought about what Amy had told him about that dress. It was made by Gravian traders. The Gravian Empire. He had read about them in the cultural briefings. They came from a high-gravity world, much like Earth. Their gravity was even higher than Earth's, in fact. Something like 1.3 times Earth standard. If that dress was made from Gravian materials, woven from Gravian fabrics using Gravian techniques, then it would be dense, really dense. The jewelry, too. Everything the princess wore that was new, everything from the Gravian traders would be made for a high-gravity environment. The Valorians wouldn't notice the difference when wearing it or looking at it. But when trying to lift it, fighting against Valoria's already low gravity, the true weight would become apparent. To a Valorian, it would be like trying to lift several times the princess's normal weight. Jake did some quick mental math. Princess Kira probably weighed around 40 kilograms in her normal clothes. That was standard for Valorians. But if her dress and jewelry were made from high-gravity materials, they could easily weigh another 40 or 50 kilograms. To Jake, that would feel light. He had grown up in Earth's gravity, but to a Valorian it would be crushing. Jake looked at Amy. "I think I know what's wrong," he said quietly. Amy raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "What?" The palace council chamber was packed with nobles, scholars, and confused knights. Jake stood in the center of the room, feeling very much out of place. Princess Kira sat beside her father on the raised platform, and she kept glancing at Jake with an expression he couldn't quite read. Curiosity, maybe, or perhaps she was trying to figure out if he had somehow cheated. The emperor raised his hand for silence, and the chattering voices slowly died down. "Jake Martinez," he said formally, "you have accomplished what 12 of our finest warriors could not. Before we proceed, we must understand how this is possible. Our scholars have examined the princess. They have examined the knights. All are healthy and strong. Yet you, who are not even a soldier, carried her with apparent ease." "Explain." Jake cleared his throat. Public speaking had never been his strength, but he was good at explaining technical concepts. He just had to treat this like a project briefing. "Your Majesty, it's about gravity and weight, and how different worlds create different kinds of strength." He gestured to one of the scholars. "May I use your display board?" The elderly scholar looked surprised but nodded and handed Jake a light pen used for writing on the chamber's projection surfaces. Jake began drawing simple diagrams. "Valoria has low gravity," he said, drawing a circle to represent the planet, "about 0.4 times what my homeworld has. That means everything here weighs less than it would on Earth. A Valorian who weighs 100 kilograms here would weigh 250 kilograms on Earth." He drew another circle, representing Earth. "Humans evolved in high gravity. Our muscles, our bones, our whole bodies are built to operate under that stress. When I came to Valoria, suddenly everything felt light. I can jump higher here, lift more, move faster, not because I'm especially strong for a human, but because your gravity is so much lower than what my body is designed for." The nobles were listening intently now. Princess Kira leaned forward, her violet eyes focused on the diagrams. "But that doesn't explain why our knights failed," one of the nobles objected. "They are strong even by our standards. They should have been able to lift the princess easily, regardless of her weight." Jake nodded. "That's where the second part comes in. The dress." He looked at Princess Kira. "Your Highness, may I ask where your ceremonial clothes came from?" "They were a gift from the Gravian traders," she replied. "For the ceremony. The fabric was said to be the finest in the galaxy." "And the Gravians come from a high-gravity world," Jake continued. "Even higher than Earth, about 1.3 times Earth's gravity. When they make fabric, when they craft jewelry, they use materials from their own world. Dense materials, heavy materials, materials that work well in their environment." He drew more diagrams showing the relationship between material density and gravity. "To you, the dress looks normal. It feels normal when you're wearing it, because your body distributes the weight. But when someone tries to lift you, they're not just lifting your normal weight. They're lifting your weight plus the weight of a dress and jewelry made from materials 3 times denser than what you usually wear." The court physician stood up, his eyes wide. "That would mean the princess, in her ceremonial clothes, weighs approximately 90 kilograms instead of her normal 40. For our knights in our low gravity, that would feel like trying to lift someone who weighed over 200 kilograms in their perception." "Exactly," Jake said. "It's not that the knights were weak. They were fighting physics they didn't understand. The dress created an unexpected weight that their bodies weren't prepared for." Princess Kira stood up, examining her dress with new understanding. "So this beautiful gift was actually sabotage?" "No, Your Highness," Jake said quickly. "I don't think it was intentional. The Gravians probably had no idea it would cause a problem. To them, this is normal fabric. They wouldn't think about how it would affect people in low gravity. It's just a cultural misunderstanding." The Emperor stroked his chin thoughtfully. "But you, Jake Martinez, you lifted her easily, because you come from a heavy world." "Yes, Your Majesty. To me, 90 kilograms feels light. On Earth, I regularly lift equipment that weighs much more. My body is built for it." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Finally, one of the older nobles spoke up. "The tradition is clear. Anyone who completes the sacred test has proven themselves worthy to serve as royal guard. The human has completed the test. He's not a knight," another noble protested. "He has no training in combat or protocol. He's an engineer, a worker. How can he possibly serve as the princess's guardian?" "The tradition doesn't specify that the guardian must be a knight," Princess Kira said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "It only says they must prove their ability to protect me by carrying me to safety. Jake Martinez has done that. He has proven something our own knights could not. Your Highness, Surveillance spoke up, his voice heavy with shame. I mean no disrespect to the human, but surely you cannot want an alien as your guardian. Someone who doesn't understand our ways, our culture. Someone who is not one of us. Jake felt the weight of those words. Surveillance was right in a way. Jake didn't belong here. He had never meant to get involved in Valorian politics or traditions. He just wanted to finish his engineering project and go home. But Princess Kira stood up, and there was steel in her voice. Surveillance, you are a good knight and have served our realm well. But consider what happened today. Our finest warriors attempted a task that should have been simple. All of them failed. They failed because they didn't understand what they were facing. They saw a challenge that looked familiar and approached it with traditional methods. She gestured to Jake. This human, this engineer, he looked at the same challenge and saw it differently. He analyzed it. He understood the variables. He found the solution. Is that not also a valuable trait in a guardian? The ability to see what others miss? To solve problems rather than just fight them? The Emperor smiled slightly. It was clear he was proud of his daughter's reasoning. My daughter makes an excellent point. However, we cannot ignore tradition entirely. Jake Martinez, do you wish to serve as royal guard to Princess Kira? Jake felt panic rise in his chest. Your Majesty, I'm honored, truly. But I have responsibilities. The water system project is only half finished. I have a team depending on me. I'm not trained for this kind of work. I wouldn't even know where to begin, you see? Another noble said. The human himself admits he's not suitable. Princess Kira looked disappointed, though she tried to hide it. Jake felt a strange pang of guilt. She had defended him, and now he was refusing the honor. But what else could he do? He wasn't a bodyguard. He was an engineer. The Emperor seemed to be thinking deeply. Perhaps there is a compromise, he said slowly. Jake Martinez, you say your project will take time to complete. How long? At least another 6 months, Your Majesty. Maybe 8. And Princess Kira, the Emperor turned to his daughter. You have your diplomatic tour scheduled to begin soon, correct? Your visits to the frontier colonies? Yes, Father. I'm supposed to depart in 2 weeks. The tour will last 3 months. The Emperor nodded. Then here is my proposal. Jake Martinez will serve as royal guard to Princess Kira for the duration of her diplomatic tour. 3 months. This fulfills the tradition as he has proven himself worthy. It also allows time for our scholars to study this gravity phenomenon and adjust our ceremonies accordingly. After the 3 months, Jake can return to his engineering work, and we will hold a new selection ceremony with knights who understand what they're facing. The nobles began murmuring among themselves. Jake could see them weighing the proposal. It was a compromise that might satisfy everyone. What about training? Surveillance asked. Even if we accept this arrangement, the human knows nothing of protection protocols, diplomatic security, or royal etiquette. Then you will teach him, the Emperor said simply. You and Lady Sarah, you are our finest knights. Spend the next 2 weeks preparing Jake Martinez as best you can. He won't become a true knight in that time, but he can learn the basics. Surveillance looked like he wanted to protest, but he bowed instead. As you command, Your Majesty, the Emperor looked at Jake. This is not optional, Jake Martinez. You completed the sacred test. Tradition demands that you serve, but I am offering you a time-limited service that allows you to return to your work afterward. This is as much compromise as I can provide. Do you accept? Jake looked around the chamber. He saw the expectant faces of the nobles, the skeptical expressions of the knights, and the hopeful look in Princess Kira's eyes. He thought about Amy, who would have to manage the project while he was gone. He thought about his comfortable routine, his tools, his familiar work. Then he thought about how Princess Kira had stood up for him, how she had found value in his different perspective, how she had defended his right to be here, even though he was an outsider. I accept, Your Majesty, Jake said finally. I'll do my best to serve Princess Kira for the next 3 months. The Emperor smiled. Excellent. Then it is decided. Jake Martinez is hereby appointed as royal guard to Princess Kira for the duration of her diplomatic tour. The ceremony is concluded, though not in the way we expected. As the council chamber began to empty, Princess Kira approached Jake. Up close, she was even more striking than he had realized. There was an intelligence in... The shuttle lifted off from the capital spaceport just after dawn. Jake sat in the Guardian's seat. a position near the door that allowed him to watch both the princess and the entrance. It felt ridiculous, like he was playing dress-up in someone else's life. But this was his job now, at least for the next 3 months. Princess Kira sat across from him, reviewing data on her portable display. She had been quiet since boarding, focused on her work. Also traveling with them were 2 diplomatic aides, a xenobiology research assistant named Peter, and a pilot. It was a small group by royal standards, but Princess Kira had insisted she didn't want an enormous entourage disturbing the frontier colonies. "First stop is the mining colony on Kepler Station," Peter said, reading from his own display. "Population about 1,500. They extract rare minerals from the asteroids in the system. Been there for 8 years now." Jake looked out the window as Valoria fell away beneath them. The planet was beautiful from orbit, with its silver cities gleaming like jewels against the blue and green landscape. Soon they would enter faster-than-light travel, and Valoria would be far behind. The journey to Kepler Station took 6 hours. Jake spent the time reading reports and trying to understand what they would find there. Mining colonies were tough places, he knew. Hard work in difficult conditions, far from the comforts of civilization. The people who chose that life were either desperate or adventurous, and sometimes both. When they arrived, Jake got his first look at a frontier colony. Kepler Station was a massive structure built into an asteroid, with docking bays cut directly into the rock. Lights gleamed from windows and work areas, but much of the station looked rough and industrial. This wasn't the elegant architecture of the capital. This was functional, practical, and worn. The station administrator, a weathered Valorian named Marcus, greeted them at the docking bay. He bowed to Princess Kira, but his movements were stiff, like he wasn't used to formality. "Your Highness, welcome to Kepler Station. We've prepared quarters for you and your group." Princess Kira smiled warmly. "Thank you, Administrator Marcus. I'm eager to learn about your operations here. I understand the mining work is both difficult and vital to the Empire." Marcus nodded, but Jake noticed a certain tension in his expression. "We do our best, Your Highness. Would you like to rest first or begin your tour?" "Let's begin the tour," Princess Kira said. "I've rested enough during travel. Show me everything, Administrator. Don't hide the problems. I want to see the reality of frontier life." Jake followed as Marcus led them through the station. The conditions were harsher than he had expected. The living quarters were cramped. The air recycling systems were old and needed maintenance. The mining equipment was held together with improvised repairs. But the people worked hard, and there was a sense of pride in what they accomplished. In the main mining operations center, Jake noticed something that made him stop. The environmental controls were fluctuating, showing temperature variations that shouldn't be happening. He studied the display, his engineer's mind automatically analyzing the problem. "Administrator," Jake said, "your thermal regulation system is failing. You see these fluctuations? That's not normal." Marcus looked at the display and sighed. "We know. We've been trying to fix it for months. The replacement parts we need are expensive, and we've been waiting for a supply shipment. Until then, we manage as best we can." Jake walked over to the control panel and started examining it more closely. "May I?" Marcus shrugged. "Sure, but our technicians have already looked at it. There's nothing we can do without new parts." Jake pulled up the system schematics and studied them. After a few minutes, he saw the problem. "You don't need new parts. Your system is configured wrong. Whoever set this up didn't account for the asteroid's thermal mass. You're fighting against physics instead of working with it." He began making adjustments to the settings, rerouting power flow, and changing the timing of the cooling cycles. Within 10 minutes, the fluctuations began to stabilize. The miners who had been watching started to murmur in surprise. "How did you do that?" Marcus asked, staring at the now stable display. "I'm an engineer," Jake said simply. "This is what I do. Your technicians are good, but they're focused on mining equipment. Environmental systems are my specialty." Princess Kira had been watching quietly. Now she spoke up. "Administrator Marcus, what other equipment issues are you facing?" Over the next several hours, Jake found himself examining systems throughout the station. He fixed a water recycling problem that had been reducing efficiency for months. He recalibrated power distribution to prevent the brownouts that had been plaguing the residential sections. He showed the station technicians how to modify their mining equipment to reduce wear and tear on critical components. By the time they returned to their quarters for the evening, Marcus looked like a different person. The tension was gone, replaced by genuine gratitude. "Your Highness," he said to Princess Kira, "I don't know what to say. We've been struggling with these problems for so long. I was planning to bring them up in meetings to beg for resources. But your guardian just solved most of them in an afternoon." Princess Kira smiled. "Jake Martinez is full of surprises. I'm learning that engineers see the world differently than the rest of us." That night, as Jake lay in his assigned quarters, he thought about the day. He had expected to spend his time standing around looking official and guarding Princess Kira from threats that would never come. Instead, he had spent the day doing actual engineering work, solving real problems for people who needed help. Maybe this assignment wouldn't be so bad after all. The tour continued. Over the next weeks, they visited colony after colony. Each one had its own challenges, its own struggles. And at each stop, Jake found ways to help. He redesigned irrigation systems on an agricultural moon. He improved the efficiency of power generators on a remote outpost. He taught colonists how to maintain their equipment better, how to spot problems before they became critical. Word began to spread ahead of them. The princess is coming, and she's bringing an engineer who can fix anything. Colonists who had been skeptical about a royal visit started to look forward to it. They prepared lists of problems for Jake to look at. Princess Kira spent her time differently. She interviewed colonists, documented their living conditions, took extensive notes on their needs and concerns. In the evenings, she and Jake would compare findings. She would share the human stories behind the statistics, and he would share the technical solutions they needed. "You're good at this," Jake told her one evening after a particularly long day. They were sitting in the common room of a small station, reviewing data. "The colonists trust you. They open up to you." "They trust us," Princess Kira corrected. "You fix their problems so they know we're not just here for show. When you demonstrate that you care through action, people become willing to talk." Jake thought about that. She was right. His engineering work had opened doors for her research. They made a good team, even if it was an unusual partnership. Their fourth stop was at a colony called New Springs, built around natural water sources on a moon with a breathable atmosphere. It was one of the more pleasant colonies they had visited, with actual open sky and growing things. But even here they found problems. The colony's main complaint was their communication array. It kept losing signal, cutting them off from the rest of the empire for days at a time. The isolation was hard on morale, and it made emergencies dangerous. If something went wrong and they couldn't call for help, people could die. Jake spent 2 days examining their communication system. The equipment was fine. The problem was the location. The array was positioned in a valley where the moon's magnetic fields interfered with the signal. Moving it would be expensive and time-consuming, but there might be another solution. He spent hours doing calculations, working with the local technicians. Finally, he designed a relay system using 3 smaller arrays positioned on higher ground. It would cost less than moving the main array, and it would actually provide better coverage. "You're not just fixing things," Princess Kira observed as Jake presented his plans to the colony leaders. "You're improving them, making them better than they were." Jake shrugged. "That's engineering. You don't just solve the immediate problem. You look for the underlying issues and fix those too." But not everything went smoothly. At a colony called Far Haven, they encountered their first real danger. The colony was built on a planet with a harsh environment, extreme weather, and dangerous local wildlife. The colonists were tough, hardened by survival, and some of them were angry. The colony leader, a man named Gordon, was barely polite during their initial meeting. "You want to see our problems, Your Highness? Come on. I'll show you." He took them to the colony's medical facility, which was understaffed and under-equipped. He showed them the food storage that was inadequate for the long winters. He pointed out the crumbling walls of their main shelters, held together with temporary patches because they couldn't get proper building materials. "We've been asking for help for 3 years," Gordon said bitterly. 3 years of reports, requests, and pleas. You know what we got? Nothing. Not materials, not funding, not even acknowledgement. And now you show..." The shuttle descended through thick clouds toward the colony of New Haven. Jake watched through the window as lightning flickered in the distance. The weather was rough, but the pilot seemed unconcerned. This was normal for New Haven, apparently. The colony was built on a planet with violent weather patterns, but it also had rich mineral deposits and good farming land. The colonists had learned to adapt. "Last stop on the tour," Peter said from his seat. "After this, we head back to the capital." Princess Kira looked up from her notes. "New Haven has a population of about 3,000. It's one of the larger frontier colonies. They've been here for 12 years, longer than most. By all reports, they're doing well." Jake nodded, but something felt off. He had learned to trust his instincts over the past 2 months of travel. The colonies that reported they were doing well were often hiding problems, either out of pride or fear of seeming ungrateful. He made a mental note to look carefully at New Haven's infrastructure. They landed at the colony's main spaceport, a large facility that seemed more sophisticated than what they had seen at other stops. A delegation waited for them on the landing pad, led by a tall Valorian woman who introduced herself as Governor Helen. "Your Highness, welcome to New Haven," Helen said with a practiced smile. "We're honored by your visit. We've prepared a full schedule for you, including tours of our agricultural sectors, mining operations, and cultural centers." Something about the governor's tone bothered Jake. She was too smooth, too rehearsed. This wasn't the rough warmth they had encountered at other colonies. This felt like politics. The tour began and Jake's suspicions grew. Everything they were shown looked perfect. The farms were productive. The equipment was well maintained. The housing was comfortable. The colonists they met seemed content, though they didn't speak much unless asked direct questions. "This colony is very impressive," Princess Kira said during lunch with Governor Helen. "You seem to have overcome many of the challenges that other frontier settlements struggle with." "We work hard, Your Highness," Helen replied. "Discipline and proper leadership make the difference. Unlike some colonies that waste time complaining, we focus on solutions." Jake noticed several of the other officials at the table exchange uncomfortable glances. There was tension here hidden beneath the surface. After lunch, Jake excused himself to use the facilities. On his way back, he took a wrong turn deliberately and found himself in a section of the colony that wasn't on the official tour. Here things looked different. The buildings were more worn. The people moved with less confidence. He saw a group of workers repairing equipment with improvised tools, making do with what they had. "You're not supposed to be here," a voice said. Jake turned to find a young Valorian man watching him. The man looked tired, with the worn appearance of someone who worked long hours in difficult conditions. "Sorry," Jake said. "I got lost. I'm with the princess's group." The man studied him for a moment. "You're the human, the engineer they talk about. The one who fixes things. That's me." "Jake Martinez, I'm Carl," the man said. "I work in the waste processing facility. Listen, I don't have much time before someone notices I'm talking to you, but you should know that things aren't what they seem here." Jake's attention sharpened. "What do you mean?" Carl glanced around nervously. "Governor Helen only shows you what she wants you to see. The good parts of the colony. But there are problems, big problems. And anyone who speaks up about them gets punished, reassigned to worse jobs, denied resources. We're afraid to say anything because it makes life harder." "What kind of problems?" Jake asked. "The water recycling system is failing. We're using rationing to hide it. The power grid is unstable, but we only run full capacity during your visit. And there's talk of independence. Some people think we'd be better off leaving the Empire. They meet in secret, plan things. It's getting dangerous." Before Jake could ask more questions, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Carl quickly walked away, disappearing around a corner. Jake composed himself and headed back toward the official tour group. That evening, Jake shared what he had learned with Princess Kira in the privacy of her quarters. She listened carefully, her expression growing more serious as he spoke. "Independence movements," she said softly. "That's more serious than equipment failures. If New Haven is considering separating from the Empire, and if other colonies follow, it could fracture everything my father has built." "What do we do?" Jake asked. "We investigate quietly," Princess Kira said. "Tomorrow I'll tell Governor Helen I want to see the waste processing and water systems. I'll say it's for my research. You examine them carefully. Find out if what Carl told you is true." The next day, despite Helen's protest that such facilities weren't important enough for royal attention, they visited the infrastructure areas Carl had mentioned. Jake immediately saw the problems. The water recycling system was held together with temporary repairs. Critical components were failing. The power grid was straining under load and the backup systems were inadequate. Why wasn't this reported? Princess Kira asked Governor Helen directly. Helen's smooth mask slipped slightly. We handle our own problems, Your Highness. We didn't want to burden the Empire with requests for help. Self-sufficiency is important. Self-sufficiency and neglect are different things, Jake said. Your water system will fail completely within 6 months. Maybe sooner. When it does, 3,000 people will be in danger. We'll fix it ourselves, Helen insisted. With what resources? Jake challenged. I've seen your equipment. You're barely maintaining what you have. You need new components, proper materials. Pride doesn't keep people alive when the water runs out. Governor Helen's face hardened. Perhaps the Empire should send more support if they're so concerned. But they don't care about the frontier. We're forgotten out here, so we learned to take care of ourselves. The truth was starting to emerge. New Haven wasn't doing well. They were struggling just like every other colony. But Helen's pride, and possibly her politics, had prevented her from asking for help. That night, Jake was returning to his quarters when he heard voices from an empty storage area. He paused, listening. Through the partially open door, he could see a group of about 20 colonists gathered in a circle. They were speaking in low, urgent tones. The princess's visit changes nothing, a male voice said. Jake recognized it as belonging to Dax, one of the mining supervisors he had met briefly. The Empire doesn't care about us. They take our resources, our minerals, our hard work, and give us nothing in return. It's time we stood on our own. But if we declare independence, the Empire will send ships, another voice argued. They won't just let us leave. Then we fight, Dax said. We're not alone. Other colonies feel the same way. If we stand together, they can't stop all of us, Jake felt cold. This was more than just frustration. This was active planning for rebellion. He needed to tell Princess Kira immediately. But before he could move, someone grabbed his arm. Jake spun, his training from surveillance kicking in automatically. He found himself face to face with Governor Helen. Listening to private conversations, Guardian, Helen said quietly. That's not very honorable. I wasn't spying, Jake said. I was passing by and heard voices. And now you'll run to the princess and tell her about our little independence movement, Helen said. You'll report that New Haven is full of traitors planning rebellion. Are you? Jake asked directly. Helen sighed. We're desperate people who feel abandoned. Yes, there are some who talk about independence. Dax has been recruiting for months. I don't agree with him, but I understand his anger. We've asked for help. We've sent reports. We get nothing in response. What are people supposed to think? That maybe the Empire doesn't know how bad things really are, Jake said. Princess Kira has spent 2 months visiting frontier colonies. She's documented everything. She's building a case for reform. But if you rebel before she can present it, you'll destroy any chance of peaceful change. Pretty words, Helen said. But words don't fix water systems. Words don't feed people or keep them safe. No, but action does, Jake said. And Princess Kira is taking action. Give her a chance. Before Helen could respond, shouts erupted from the storage area. Jake and Helen rushed inside to find chaos. The secret meeting had erupted into an argument. Dax was on one side, his supporters behind him. On the other side were colonists who disagreed with independence. This is exactly why we need to leave the Empire, Dax was shouting. We can't even agree among ourselves because we're afraid of what the capital will think. We've become cowards, afraid to stand up for ourselves. We're not cowards, Carl shouted back. We're practical. Independence will get people killed. There has to be a better way. There is no better way, Dax said. The Empire has shown us who they are. They don't care about us. So why should we care about them? Jake saw the situation spiraling out of control. He was about to intervene when Princess Kira walked into the storage area. She must have been looking for him and followed the noise. Behind her came several of her aides and some of Helen's security personnel. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at the princess. So, Princess Kira said calmly, this is what the Empire's neglect has created. Secret meetings, talk of rebellion, colonists so desperate they... Jake spent the next 5 days working almost without sleep. He mapped every component of New Haven's water system, calculated stress points, and designed solutions that could be implemented with available resources. He worked alongside the local engineers, teaching them techniques they had never seen before, showing them how to think about problems differently. Princess Kira spent her time differently. She met with every group in the colony, from miners to farmers to families with children. She listened to their concerns, their fears, their hopes. She didn't make promises she couldn't keep, but she was honest about what she intended to do and what obstacles she faced. On the third day, Jake was working in the main water processing facility when Dax approached him. The mining supervisor had been watching Jake work for the past hour, saying nothing. "You really are just an engineer, aren't you?" Dax said finally. Jake looked up from his calculations. "What do you mean? I thought maybe you were pretending. That the engineering was just cover for being a spy or a military operative. But you're genuine. You actually care about fixing the water system more than you care about politics." "Politics is complicated," Jake said. "Water systems, I understand. People need clean water to survive. That's simple. That's something I can actually help with." Dax was quiet for a moment. "I was wrong about you. And maybe wrong about the princess, too. She's not like the other nobles we've dealt with." "She's not," Jake agreed. "She actually listens. And she's not afraid to admit when the Empire has failed people. The question is whether she can actually change anything," Dax said. "The Emperor is surrounded by advisors who don't care about the frontier. They'll block her reforms." "Maybe," Jake said. "But I've learned something over the past 2 months. Princess Kira is persistent. And she's smart. She doesn't just argue with emotions. She brings data, evidence, practical solutions. That's harder to ignore than complaints." "I hope you're right," Dax said. "Because if nothing changes, there will be violence. Not just here. Other colonies are having the same conversations we are. The Empire is sitting on a powder keg." On the fourth day, Jake finished the water system redesign. He presented it to the colony's technical team, walking them through every detail. He showed them which parts needed to be ordered, which could be improvised, and how to implement the changes safely. "This will work," the lead engineer said, studying the plans. "It's brilliant, actually. You've used the colony's existing infrastructure in ways we never thought of. That's because you were too close to the problem," Jake explained. "Sometimes you need an outside perspective to see the possibilities." He transmitted the critical component specifications back to his team on Valoria with a request for rush production and shipping. They replied within hours that the parts would be fabricated and sent within 3 weeks. On the final evening before departure, Governor Helen hosted a dinner for Princess Kira and her group. The atmosphere was different from their arrival. The smooth political facade was gone. Helen looked tired but genuine. "Your Highness," Helen said as they sat down to eat, "I owe you an apology. When you arrived, I tried to hide our problems. I thought showing weakness would make things worse. I was wrong." "You were trying to protect your people," Princess Kira said. "I understand that. But you can't solve systemic problems alone. Helen, the frontier colonies need to be honest about their challenges so the Empire can address them." "If the Empire will address them," Helen said carefully. "I will make sure they do," Princess Kira replied. "But I need your help. I need reports from New Haven. Real reports, not the sanitized versions you've been sending. Document everything. Send it directly to me. I'm creating a Colonial Advisory Council that reports to my office. You'll be one of the first members." Helen looked surprised. "A direct line to the royal family? That's unprecedented." "So is the situation we're in," Princess Kira said. "Unprecedented problems require unprecedented solutions." Later that night, Jake stood on the colony's observation deck, looking up at the stars. Tomorrow they would leave, returning to Valoria. His 3-month assignment was almost over. Soon he would go back to being just an engineer working on water systems. "You're going to miss it," Princess Kira said, stepping onto the deck beside him. "Miss what?" "It's the frontier. The work we've been doing. You've made a real difference out here, Jake. These colonies won't forget you." Jake thought about that. She was right. He would miss it. The past 3 months had been the most meaningful work of his life. Not because the engineering was difficult, but because it mattered so directly to real people. "What happens when we get back?" Jake asked. "I present my findings to my father and the council," Princess Kira said. "I fight for reforms. Infrastructure investment, colonial representation, better support systems. It won't be easy. There will be opposition from nobles who don't want to spend resources on the frontier. Will you win? I don't know," she admitted. "But I have to try. These people are depending on me." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Finally, Jake spoke. "I've been thinking about something. When my assignment ends, I'll go back to the water project in the capital. But that project will eventually finish, and after that, I could request a transfer to Frontier Infrastructure Development. If such a department exists, Princess Kira turned to look at him. It doesn't exist yet, but it will if my reforms pass. Are you saying you'd want to continue this work? I think I am, Jake said. The colonies need engineers who understand their unique challenges, and I've learned more in 3 months out here than I did in years working in the capital. It feels important. It is important, Princess Kira said softly, and I would be grateful to have you continue this work. But Jake, you've fulfilled your obligation. You carried me up the ceremonial steps. You served as my guardian. You don't owe the Empire anything more. Maybe not, Jake said, but I've seen what needs to be done. Walking away from that doesn't feel right. Princess Kira smiled. You're not what I expected when you stepped forward at the ceremony. I thought you were just being gallant or showing off. I didn't realize you were someone who actually sees problems and can't help but fix them. Engineers are like that, Jake said. We see broken things and our hands itch to repair them. The frontier is very broken, Princess Kira observed. It will take years to fix. Good thing I like long-term projects then. The next morning, they departed New Haven. The colonists gathered to see them off, and the mood was different from any other colony they had visited. There was hope here now, tempered with caution but real nonetheless. Dax approached Jake before boarding. 6 months, he said. We're counting on you both. We won't let you down, Jake promised. The journey back to Valoria took 6 hours. Jake spent most of it helping Princess Kira organize her massive collection of data. 3 months of documentation, hundreds of interviews, technical assessments of every colony they had visited. It was comprehensive and damning, showing clearly how the Empire had neglected its frontier. This is going to cause quite a reaction, Jake observed. I'm counting on it, Princess Kira said. Sometimes you need to shake things up to create change. When they arrived at Valoria, the Emperor himself was waiting at the spaceport. He embraced his daughter warmly, then turned to Jake. Guardian Martinez, the Emperor said formally, you have completed your service. The 3 months are concluded. On behalf of the Empire, I thank you for protecting my daughter and fulfilling the sacred tradition. It was an honor, Your Majesty, Jake said, bowing. I hear you did more than protect her, the Emperor continued. I've received reports that you repaired infrastructure at every colony you visited, that you solved problems our own engineers couldn't address, that the frontier colonists speak of you with great respect. I'm an engineer, Your Majesty. I saw problems that needed fixing. The Emperor smiled. My daughter has always had a talent for seeing the value in unexpected places. Come, both of you. We have much to discuss. The council meeting was held the next day. Princess Kira presented her findings to the Emperor and his advisors. She used every piece of evidence she had gathered, every story from the colonists, every technical assessment Jake had provided. She spoke for 3 hours, painting a picture of a frontier that was struggling, neglected, and on the verge of rebellion. Some of the advisors tried to dismiss her concerns. The frontier colonies are always complaining, one noble said. They knew the challenges when they chose to settle there. They didn't choose neglect, Princess Kira countered. They chose to expand the Empire to bring wealth and resources back to the core worlds. They deserve support in return. The debate went on for hours. Jake watched from his seat near the back of the chamber. He wasn't supposed to speak unless called upon, but he listened carefully to every argument. Finally, the Emperor raised his hand for silence. My daughter has presented compelling evidence. The frontier is indeed in crisis, but reforms of this scale will require significant resources. Where will we find the funding? Jake stood up before he could stop himself. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. Your Majesty, may I speak? The Emperor looked surprised but nodded. You have served my daughter well, Jake Martinez. Speak. The frontier colonies are producing valuable resources, Jake said.